everybody. Alright, I don't usually make videos of the process of cutting out the pattern pieces and the fabric, but I thought I'd go ahead and do one for this, maybe speed it up so it's not a long drawn out process. So first I start out with, I print out, this is for the How You Doin bowler handbag. I printed out pages 2 and 3 from the PDF, which is page 1 and 2 of instructions, for the cut list, and I check that off as I cut the items out. And then I printed the last 4 pages of the pattern pieces. So first I cut the pattern pieces out. Nothing special about that. Sometimes I'll use my rotary cutter on the straight edges. I know everybody doesn't like rotary cutters, but I do. Oh, before you even start cutting, make sure that your test square measures 1 inch exactly. I'll pop up on the screen a screenshot of the print settings. So you want to open your pattern in Adobe Reader on your computer, print the pattern at full size or 100%, and make sure it's set to auto rotate and center. And everything should print okay that way and not have any of the pattern pieces cut off the edge. So this is how I cut. Sorry about the light, it's sunny out. I can't really block it. Okay, you'll notice, let me point this out. I won't record me cutting out all the pattern pieces, but for the overlays, if you choose for your exterior contrast to be a fabric, you'll use the fabric overlay, and if you choose a vinyl, leather, or cork, you'll use this vinyl overlay. So this one will have a raw edge, so make sure it's a fabric that will not unravel. And this one will not have a raw edge on it, but will get too thick probably for a lot of leathers and vinyl. So that's why I have the 2 different pieces. And then the same for your connector overlay. If you're using a vinyl for your exterior contrast, you'll cut this one out. If you're using fabric, you'll cut out this and this. And you'll cut this out of the fabric, and then this is for stabilizer, like Peltex. So I'm going to cut out, I'm using vinyl for my overlays, my exterior contrast. I'll go ahead and cut that one out and this one. So I'm going to cut out the rest of these pattern pieces, and then we'll start cutting our fabric. Okay, I have all the pieces cut out. You will notice that some of them have letters, A and B, and these are the pieces that need to be taped together. So you will butt the ends together, matching the letters, so A to A and B to B, and then tape them. All right, now I have laid out my cutting list the way I like to cut. So like I cut all of the exterior fabric at once and then all exterior contrast. So that way I only have one fabric on my board at a time, and I'm not trying to cut all the main panels out of the different pieces and so on. So first we'll start with the exterior, which I'm going to keep this bag a little more simple looking, and I'm going to use something pretty on the lining, and then the solid linen on the exterior. Okay, cut it this way. I bought this from So Weird Fabric Shop, which she has a Facebook group and runs sales all the time. I buy a lot of my apparel fabrics, I guess, since I started making bag patterns. Or I don't know, when I want to break from bag sewing, and I kind of started making some clothes. I don't make those patterns, obviously, but that's how I found her shop, and I buy my like knit fabric from there. Well, she also has some nice woven and gives options for pre-orders all the time and nice sales for that. So check it out if you haven't. That's So Weird, SEWEIRD. So let's see if you can see that. So here's what I'm doing to cut the main panel, and you actually need 2 of these, so why not cut them at the same time? This isn't directional. I'll just fold it. Hang on. Here's why I don't I film myself cutting them. Okay, so you cut on the fold. So I've got that folded so that I can cut both main panels at one time. If you want to use scissors, you can trace onto this. You can pin this in place and cut around it. I just hold them down and use my rotary cutter. This is helpful. I don't have any cardstock right now, but I like to print my pattern pieces out on cardstock, and then they're easier to cut around with the rotary cutter. Okay, so there are both main exterior panels, and then we have exterior zipper panel. So there's an exterior zipper panel and a lining zipper panel, and they are a little bit different width, so make sure you use the right one. And we need 2 of these as well. I just cut off my the tails of the fabric so it's not in the way. Alright, I will lay this out so that I can also cut both at once. Is this video necessary of me cutting? I don't really know. Alright, so we're cutting 2 on the fold. If your fabric is directional, you might need to not cut them all at the same time like this. But since I don't have a print, it's fine. Alright, to exterior zipper panels. So that's all I'm cutting out of this exterior fabric, which actually though I think I might be making my own piping because I don't have any that matches. So I'll use that for the piping. So what I do is I cut then is I will check these off. You don't have to write on your pattern if you want to print the whole thing and keep it and not have marks all over it every time you make it, but or use like a friction pen that's erasable, or pencil obviously. So I just mark them off as I go. So next I'll cut the exterior contrast. I'll go ahead and do that on the video also. This is vinyl, so there's a list for vinyl exterior contrast and then a separate one for fabric. So if you're using vinyl, you won't follow this, and if you're using fabric, then you won't follow this. So let's get that out. Move all this out of the way. Okay, I have my vinyl fabric. I believe I purchased this one from fabric.com. There's a similar at Joann's in the upholstery fabric section. I like vinyl that has this like fabric backing on it. I don't so much like marine vinyl because it's a little thicker and stiffer. I find this upholstery weight vinyl easier to work with. So that's what I choose to use. So what you'll do with the pieces that are going to be cut out of the exterior contrast vinyl is you will lay it out on the vinyl and trace it. You know what, let's cut the handles first actually, since we're on a straight edge. So we need 2 handles, 3 inches by 16 inches each. I'm going to first cut off the selvage edge here. Get it to lay flat. Okay, and sometimes also you'll notice that the vinyl is stretchy, so mine is stretchier this direction than this direction. So I'm going to cut my handles this direction so that it's not so stretchy. And 3 inches by 16 inches. So I just line that up on my rotary cutter. And cut around. We want 2 handles. Okay, now the other pieces we will just trace onto the back of the vinyl with a pen or marker. It doesn't matter if it's a disappearing pen or something that can be erased, because you won't see this part anyway on the finished bag. So I mark here first so I know right where the center line is when I flip the pattern piece over. Trace around it. And this is helpful too if you use cardstock to print on. It's easier to trace around. Plus your pattern pieces last longer. So flip that over and trace the other side, and you'll notice that I overlap the edge of the pattern piece over those center marks a little bit, since I marked off the edge, if that makes sense. So I'm not making this longer than it should be. Okay. The vinyl overlay, which goes in the bottom of the front of the bag, you'll cut to this direction and then you flip it over and cut to mirrored. So we'll trace 2 of them this way. And you want to mark in some way what side is the top. This is not the same length. Or yeah, this edge and this edge are not the same length. So if you get them sideways like this, then you'll have issues matching things up. So you 2 in that direction, and then flip it over and trace 2 this direction. Then we have the side gusset panel, which will go at the end of the zipper panels. And this you'll cut 2 on the fold, so the same as the way you did the trace the bottom panel. I mark the center and then trace around the edges. Flip it over and trace around the other half. You'll cut 2 of these out. And then the vinyl connector overlay, you'll trace around like the star shape, and those dotted lines there are where you'll fold later to make it the correct shape for the bag. So I'm going to cut out everything else not on video, and then I'll come back when I do the fusing. Okay, so now to fuse the interfacing. You'll like to see my lovely ironing board cover. Don't get distracted while you leave your iron sitting on something to fuse it, because that's what happens. So, I have my lining fabric here, which is actually like a cotton lawn, so it's a little bit thinner than like quilting cotton. So what I did was the woven interfacing, which I use Pellin Shape Flex 101. I cut out 2 pieces instead of 1 for each of the lining fabrics, just because it's so thin. So you can use, if you have a steam press or a heat press, you can use that, which I do, but for this video's sake, I'll fuse my interfacing with the iron. So my iron, the steam does not work that great, and I find that this works better anyway. I have this spray bottle of water, so I just spray down the woven interfacing, and if you see, do you see how much it shrinks when you spray it? So if you don't spray it first and you don't use steam, which I've done this before, you just adhere that interfacing with no moisture, and then your bag gets wet, it will wrinkle because that interfacing shrinks. So if you do you see how much that shrank? It was just as big, and now it's like a 1/4 inch smaller in some areas. So definitely spray your interfacing down. I think some people like maybe take it off the bolt and re-wet it, or wet the whole thing to shrink it and then dry it, and that just sounds like a pain to me. So I cut it out, I spray it before I fuse it. That shrinks it. I've already ironed my fabric, which I sprayed as well when I fused it. Or, I'm sorry, when I ironed it, I sprayed my fabric down to get the wrinkles out, so that would pre-shrink my fabric, and now I'm pre-shrinking the interfacing as well. So I'm going to just fuse 2 pieces of Shape Flex to each of my lining panels. If you're using quilting cotton as the pattern calls for, then that isn't necessary. If you're using something thinner and you want that extra stability, it doesn't hurt. I don't want my lining to be super thin, so the more interfacing the better, I think. And you just follow the manufacturer's instructions to fuse it. I usually fuse from the back, and then I'll flip it over and give one more good press from the right side, just to make sure that everything's fused. Alright, so for this bag I'm going to go for just a plain gray exterior, which this is linen, cotton linen fabric. Again, I got that from So Weird. She has a Facebook group. I don't know, there's not a right side or wrong side really, it looks the same on both sides, so choose your side, I guess. And then again, if your exterior fabric feels thinner than a cotton woven, or I'm sorry, than like a quilting cotton, go ahead and use double the fusible woven interfacing. And I always spray this down to pre-shrink it. Alright, so you go through and fuse all of the woven interfacing, and then we will attach the foam, which I didn't even cut yet, but I'll show how I cut that. So I'll finish my fusing and then I'll be back. So I have everything interfaced. I wanted to point out this is my exterior contrast bottom panel, and the firm interfacing or Peltex is fused to it, and then a layer of woven interfacing is fused over top to hold that in place. So when you're using vinyl, definitely test it with your iron to make sure it won't melt. I have ironed onto the back of this and it's fine, and I've ironed onto several different vinyls that have been fine, but always test a small piece of your vinyl to make sure. Use a pressing cloth between it, and just to make sure that it won't melt. If you cannot iron it, then I would probably use some double-sided tape to put the firm interfacing on, place the woven interfacing over top, and then baste this at about 1/4 of an inch seam allowance to hold that in place. And that interfacing will just make sure that this firm stabilizer stays in place when the bag's in use. Okay, so to cut out the foam, I use the actual exterior main panels as kind of my guide. I just lay it on top and very carefully I go around it with my rotary cutter. So if you don't like using rotary cutters or you don't have one, I would pin the fabric to the foam and cut it. I find that that's easier than trying to use the pattern piece, unless you print 2 pattern pieces and tape them together so that you have a full size piece. So I just go all the way around. The foam, you'll have one for each exterior main panel, one piece for each exterior side gusset panel, and then you'll have one for each of the exterior zipper panels. So once you have this all cut out, you will use clips to clip it in place. I have the other one already clipped, and I sew from this side, so it seems to keep the fabric pulled more taut to the foam to sew with the foam side up. The exterior zipper panels, I cut the foam out using this as a guide, but then we need to trim back 1/4 of an inch off the edge of the foam, and this is because that straight edge will be sewn to the zipper. So by trimming this, we reduce some of that bulk. So again, I just use my rotary cutter to not very straight cut that. I think the zigzag will hold my mess up in place. Okay. So now that those are trimmed, we will zigzag just on the foam along the straight edge of both of these zipper panels, and then we will baste the foam in place. Let's show you the one I didn't cut. So this will be, the foam will be 1/4 of an inch away from the raw straight edge of the exterior zipper panel. You will baste it at each of the short ends and along this curved edge, and then, and you'll do that with a zigzag stitch, and then there's one more piece of woven interfacing that you'll put over top, and that will just help to hold the foam to the exterior fabric along that straight edge. So we will go baste everything now. Okay, so we are at my domestic sewing machine. I have it set to a zigzag stitch. I just use as wide as it goes, and my stitch length is 4. I just try to put it on something that's longer. It's just to compress this foam down. It's not really gonna, in the long run, hold anything in place. So, alright, so first I'm just going to, this foam is not attached to anything, and I'm just going to zigzag along the long straight edge of this, both exterior zipper panel foam pieces. And I have pink thread in here, just because that's what I used last, I guess. No reason. Okay, so that edge now is compressed so it won't be so thick alongside the zipper. Alright, and I'm going to grab some clips. Alright, so you want to baste this to the curved edge and both short edges. So first I'm clipping it to the short edge. I don't know if you can see that. Okay. And now I will pin it, or clip it, pin it. I say pin all the time, even though I'm clipping. Alright. So all the way along this curved edge. Okay, and now we will run a zigzag stitch around the short ends and the straight edge to, I want to start here, hold the foam in place. The long, or I'm sorry, I said the straight edge. The long curved edge and both short ends. The straight edge will not be attached through basting. Okay, now that that is basted on those 3 sides, you will go back to the iron and put the other piece of woven interfacing over the top of the foam and baste that in place. Oh, or iron it in place. Probably would help if I put it the right way. And that way the foam is going to be held to your exterior fabric even along that straight edge. Okay, so we will do that, and I will finish basting all the foam, and then we'll get started with the assembly instructions in the next video.